Hi, this is Julie, and a note about this episode. We were recording it and having so much fun doing so, we went very long and decided that this was such a special episode on kids and dogs and moms that we would present it to you for Mother's Day in 2 parts. So, after you listen to Your Family Dog episode 120, make sure to tune in to 120.5. Now, without further ado, here we go.
Welcome to Your Family Dog, a podcast dedicated to helping families love living with dogs.
Hi, and welcome back to Your Family Dog. I'm Julie Fudge Smith, and I'm here with Tina Spring, and we have a very special guest. Of course, we say that every week, but then I think every time we have a guest, but I think all of our guests are very special, so it's not that I'm lying, and they're all very special. Anyway, we have a special guest today, and it's Dr. Sara Wyckoff, who has her PhD in biocultural anthropology and her master's in occupational therapy. She has been a practicing occupational clinician with a specialty in pediatric development for, somewhere close to a millennium, or not close to a millennial. She didn't have any millennials, but she has been practicing for a very long time. And
raised a millennial.
That's true. She did raise a millennial. And she is now a professor of research in occupational therapy at St. Augustine University for Health Sciences here in San Diego, where I'm visiting. She's also my sister. And for many years, we have talked a lot about the similarities between dogs and kids and the way in which we approach problem solving with them. And I think it really came home to us one day when Sara was telling me about this little boy who had been diagnosed with ADD and ADHD, because he was hyperactive too. And Sara said that the diagnosis didn't feel right to her. And what she was finding was that he had a very busy schedule. He got, his mom and he were up at 6 and he was at school before 7. He had school all day. Then he had after school care. Then they would, go grocery shopping, or they'd drive to McDonald's and get home, and he would get to bed late because they wanted to spend time together. And I said to her, well, if this were a dog, the 3 things that I would ask her are, what's he eating? What? Yes, Tina. What?
No,
she's counting. Okay, I thought she's telling me to time up. Okay, let's go back again. The 3 things that I would ask of a dog would be, 1, what is he eating? 2, how much sleep is this dog getting? And 3, how much exercise is this dog getting? How much play and exercise? And Sara said, exactly. Those are the 3 questions that I want to ask as well. So with that, what we wanted to talk about today was the similarities between dogs and kids and what we're looking at, and how do we help them learn the skills that they need to be successful as kids and dogs. So with that, Tina, do you have a question?
They're ganging up on me, the 2 of them. 2 pretty women who are more credentialed than I am. I see how this is going to go. All right, so we started a conversation that Julie fussed at us about, talking about this sleep piece, and I would absolutely agree. I was a human foster parent, and every child who was brought to me obviously had mental retardation and was ADD and ADHD and had all these huge behavior disorders that miraculously in 10 days were better, because I learned as a foster parent that not every child that came to me had a whole alphabet soup of disorders, that they couldn't possibly all have ADD and ADHD and oppositional defiant disorder and, a whole host of craziness. I actually had a child that they told me his IQ was 67. He was just tired of talking to psychologists. And so if you held up a yellow block, he told you it was every color except yellow. And if you held up a red block, he told you it was every color except red. So I think the same thing happens. I see manifest in my practice, so many of the same things. Not enough sleep. People don't understand what a normal sleep cycle is and how that changes developmentally, and how not providing just decent nutrition. Like it doesn't have to be, some crazy extreme, but all these pieces, I just think, yes, like it's very similar. So I don't even talk to people about exercise with their dogs anymore, or their kids for that matter, because I find that everyone's exhausted. Like the exercise piece, they've overdone. They've overstimulated everybody. So Sarah, in your practice, do you see those same things?
Absolutely. And in terms of the exercise, one of the things that we've been playing around with lately is moms and dads are exhausted when they get home, and so are the kids. And rather than let's go out in the backyard and throw the Frisbee around, is there a way we can make just a big puppy pile, not to sit down and veg out with TV, but just a big puppy pile in the living room with everybody just cozying up, maybe with a snack, maybe not, but just kind of let's all decompress together. And there is a sense of decompression that happens when you are with your tribe. When you get back and you reunite and you have physical contact and you hear the voices of your loved ones and you just get quiet with each other. And that inherent bring your whole system back down into relaxation. I don't think we know what relaxation feels like.
Oh, I would
anymore.
agree. I would agree.
And so I'm kind of going the opposite. I still maintain exercise is vital, but it has to be balanced with that decompression. And so I'm wondering, do dogs, and I would imagine, I mean, I'm a cat person and my cat loves it when I decompress. So I'm assuming dogs do the same thing. Is that true? If you got to do a big puppy pile with your kids, would the dog just come over and snuggle too? Would that be part of the?
So I'll say, in my experience, puppies have to be older to so they can do it when they're itty bitty, and then there's this developmental phase that lasts, in my experience, until they're about 2.5, where it's like trying to cuddle with a marlin.
Got it.
But then they get good at it again, and I will say, because so many of the dogs I work with in my practice are highly anxious.
Yeah.
The more we can just like rest and just have that quiet, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, lie down, just set your hand on them, the better it sets up not just that cascade into sleep, but also tomorrow. Like I see that manifest in my practice a lot. What I see is that people have been pounded into them by a certain short gentleman who has quite the cult of personality, that it's all like we have to run them 40 miles a day. And I don't actually see that. Yes, I had foster kids who got off the bus and they didn't have to. We found ways to burn off that whatever angst, frustration, energy stores from sitting still too long. So that then we could move on to other things. And that was absolutely true. And I see our dogs do that as well. But I think, if anything, in my practice, and I'll only speak for the beautiful, amazing families I work with, the kids are exhausted, mom and dad are exhausted, and the dogs are exhausted. And then everybody's mad at everybody else. And we blow through everyone's tolerance for frustration because brains just are not getting the serotonin they need. They're not getting the breaks they need, all that processing, all that stuff.
And that whole family cuddle pile where the parents also get the serotonin and they also reunite with their children in an emotionally satisfying way, I think is important. And Tina, the whole idea that kids do need to burn off that frustration from school when they get off the bus really brings me to one of the key things I learned from Julie, which I call the funnel of fun to my parents. But Julie, what did you call it?
The funnel of activity. And we did a podcast on that as well. So we'll link to that. But we call it the funnel of activity.
I call it the funnel of fun because kids love it when I say, okay, we're going to develop a funnel of fun for your family. And the whole point is to bring everybody down into that quiet place. But you can't start with, okay, everybody's frenetic, sit down in a pile, let's calm down. You can't do that. You have to start where the energy is. And if it's frenetic, you have to start with frenetic. And you have to incrementally bring it down and then down and down. And I find if my families have a set of activities at each stage, if they understand the principle, big, medium, little, in terms of activity, then quiet, then you can have a menu for each stage, and then it doesn't become stale and predictable, and it works better. And families, when I do it in a family counseling meeting, they love it. So I really, this is bringing dog activity training into my child coaching.
So, well, one of the things I was going to say is, I'm glad you brought up the funnel of activity, is that as far as exercise goes, I think that sometimes we can also think of it in terms of play as opposed to exercise. That dogs, absolutely. Because we talked with Karen Deeds about enrichment, and we talked about play and how to teach a dog to play and how to interject yourself into the play to make it more effective. And so sometimes I think what kids need is maybe not the over amount of exercise because they are exhausted, but what they need is the joy of play, just like dogs need the joy of play. So that perhaps what we need to be thinking in terms of with both kids and dogs is, yes, there's a certain amount of exercise you need to expend some energy, but what you really need, I think, is the joy of play. You need to connect to something that brings you pure joy, because I think that's lacking in our society as well. I think people have forgotten not only what it's like to relax. I know a whole lot of joyful people, that really know how to find joy in the activities that they do. And it might be partly because they're too tired, but maybe we can work a type of play that is not going to bring you into exhaustion, but is going to bring you into joy.
And that's where, for kids, I think that imaginative play, having space for your imagination to roam and just wander, is like critical, because what happens during that imaginative play is that it's almost like what happens when you're in the dreamscape. You're combining all these elements from all over the places, and you begin to process what's going on. There's also just the silly, goofy play with your dog that is amazingly therapeutic if you can teach your kid how to play with your dog appropriately. Right.
Well, the other thing I was thinking too is that the whole idea of the funnel of activity and the idea of appropriate exercise and play and relaxing and connecting all plays into both how a dog and a child views the world, which is safe and unsafe. And I think Tina really hit on something when she was talking about, good nutrition for these kids and a regular sleep schedule and, regular play activity provides them with that routine that gives them predictability in their world, and it's predictability that helps them to feel safe. And I think it's the same thing for our dogs. Our dogs need to have an idea. Predictability is not the same as rigidity. It doesn't mean that breakfast has to happen every day at 6 a.m. Breakfast has to happen. Lunch has to happen. Dinner has to happen. Homework has to happen. Downtime has to happen. All this stuff has to happen. It doesn't have to be in a rigid schedule, but it's predictability that's going to create the element of safety in this child's world or in this dog's world so that they are freed up to be fully themselves. Now,
absolutely.
Okay, great. I got that right. What do you think, Tina?
So I agree. I think for both our kids and our dogs, them understanding that we will handle the stuff that they are not powerful yet enough or able to handle, or that's anxiety provoking, that they can, I think those boundaries, that predictability to a certain extent also matriculates down to when things go nutty, like, ask me. Like, you don't have to worry about that. That's none of your beeswax. That's grown-up stuff. Or that's my owner will take care of that. And that starts with, can we handle the ugly stuff? Like, can we handle when the child is crazy, overtired, and frustrated, or their feelings are hurt? When a friend of a dog trainer friend, Rebecca Johnson, explained spoon theory to me, right? When they're out of spoons. And okay, well, I can remember saying this to some foster kids, like, I'm not going to hold against you the mean things you say to me when you're tired or hungry. Right? And I'm the same way with a puppy. I was giggling earlier because Julie had overheard me while I was prepping for the appointment, telling a puppy that's here, she's 13 weeks old, little sweet Luna, that yelling at me because she was overtired was not actually going to help, and that she just needed to take a nap, right? And our funnel of fun for her had started with go out and play with one of my infinitely patient adult dogs, lunch, and then move our bowel and our bladder, and then have some quiet laying in the sun and some playing with the human stuff. And then I was like, okay, and now it's time for a nap. And she's like, it is not time for a nap. You kept me up too long. So we do get it wrong. I get it wrong. I can remember constantly saying to foster kids, like, dude, I'm sorry I blew you up. I kept you up too long, right? Like, it'll be okay. Let's go rock. Like, we're going to go rock, and then we'll feel better. We'll read a story and we'll feel better, and then we'll go to sleep. But I think parents are really just worn out, and they don't, in many cases, especially this younger generation of parents who I love, they're so kind. They're so thoughtful. They have a ridiculous amount of pressure to get it perfect, which is, I love y'all. Your sins are absolved. It'll be imperfect. That's where the magic is, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But they really, like, I'm not sure they entirely have a pattern of how to do it, right? They know how to entertain their kids or their dogs, right? Like, I take the dog on 4 1-hour walks a day, and then we go to the dog park, and then we do brain puzzles, and I'm like, when is he sleeping? Right? And when is he learning how to just entertain himself?
And where's the time for spontaneity?
Well, there is that.
There's no time. I completely agree. I feel like the pressure on this next generation of young adults is stupendous, and I worry about all of the experts and all of our opinions and what we're doing in terms of, and don't forget this and don't forget that. And I also worry about them and when is their time to go through their own funnel of fun. When are they nourishing themselves while they nourish their dogs and their kids? Are they getting the sleep they need? That self-care is, it's got to be all wound up within the context of taking care of your children and dogs.
Right.
It's got to be mixed in there as part of the formula is self-care. And it's a big deal.
I think that I think you're right. I think there's a real pressure on this generation, and I think part of it is because this generation was raised to be told what to do. They've been raised by daycare, and everything has been scheduled, so they haven't had any time to figure things out on their own. They haven't had time, or they haven't had the space to figure out what it is that they actually do enjoy. What is it that does bring them joy? What is it that is meaningful to them, and what isn't meaningful? And I think also, too, they've been having so many things presented to them, and they've been so wired on electronics that their brains are wired differently. I think that the electronic generation has a different way of thinking and viewing the world, and I can't help but think that makes a big difference in how you interact with others, that you have these expectations of watching so much reality TV, of the way things are to be. Like my son-in-law right now, who's in construction, he says the worst thing that happened to the construction industry was HGTV, because people have all these unrealistic expectations on houses and what you can do and how much it's going to cost. And they don't understand the nature of what they're asking their contractor to do, because they see these little miracles on TV that, if you saw behind the scenes, really aren't. So I wonder if sometimes, because they haven't had a chance to explore things on their own, to, play with tools, to play with sticks, to figure out how things work on their own, that they don't have any idea about sort of how the world works in some way.
And how messy.
Yeah.
It's okay to be.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, that life is messy.
And that it's okay to be frustrated. It's okay to be tired. It's okay to be angry. It's okay to be confused. That we'll figure it out, right? Like, we'll fix it. I always feel really sad for when I meet those families where usually it's mom, but it seems like she's holding in her heart that her children and her dog should never ever be unhappy.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And my own feeling
and so
is,
she's just a cusp of a human being at this point, right? Like, there's dust and a little bit of skin on the outside, because that woman is exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
She's exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, no, like, frustration teaches.
Right. You have to have frustration in your life. It's important. You just don't want it to overflow into crazy. Right. But that doesn't mean a dose. It's dosage.
Right.
And
stress is how you learn. In fact, we did an episode with Dr. Michael Morales. We talked about stress, positive stress. I mean, that you need to have stress in your life in order to learn. If it's totally stress-free, you're not learning. And but it needs to be manageable. You need to have a little bit of arousal. Think of it. You probably do better on a test if you're just a little bit anxious, because you're much more aware, as opposed to being completely relaxed. So, but you don't want to be so anxious. I remember when I was in college once, I'd been up studying. I think I had studied for close to a decade for this test or something. And I was in the breakfast line, and I hadn't been sleeping, and I hadn't been eating, and I fainted in the breakfast line from the stress. Oh, no. And it's like, maybe this is telling me something about moderation. That you need to eat, you need to sleep, you need to study, and you need to do it in reasonable ways.
And you, as a college student, needed to fail on that.
Yeah.
And take it to an extreme to find out, and allowing yourself to go, this was too much. Sometimes that's what our kids need to find out. That's what we need to find out, and it's really okay.
So, Sarah, how would you say to the average mama, right, or dad who's listening to the podcast, how to know how much of that frustration is healthy frustration and stress, and when we've crossed over into something else, and then how and when to intervene?
Oh, that's the $1 million question.
And I'll send you my bank account later.
Right. It's a moving target. There's a threshold that's constantly changing in terms of what is possible for people. And that's part of the art of reading the ecosystem at the moment. It depends on time of day and nutrition. And I mean, you got to go through that whole thing. Are they hungry? Are they angry? Are they thirsty? Are they tired? And monitor all of that, first of all, in your brain, and take care of those issues. So there's always that piece that you constantly hold in the background, especially with little kids and teenagers. Then it's you inherently know your child. Okay, you are the expert on your child. You know if you got an explosive kid that you're not going to take it as far. You're going to do micro doses of frustration versus the tolerant kid who's got a temperament that's easier. So you trust your gut. You read your own gut on if you find yourself tensing up, chances are that's the time to step in and intervene. On the other hand, there are many families that, like your mom you were talking about, who feel like any set of tension is too much. And their own nervous system is wired to go, oh, there's any tension, I must stop it. And then it's up to you to develop your tolerance for frustration. And oh man, I just didn't give you any kind of good answer at all. But
no,
it's just,
I think you gave an honest answer.
Yeah,
it's
and I think
so dog trainer clients all hate the "it depends" answer, and yet it is.
It does.
Right? Like, Julie, do you say "it depends" 150 times a day?
I do. And,
I'm like, well, you're going to hate this, but it depends.
Well, one of the things that I tell people too is that I think, Sarah, what you're pointing out here is something that I feel like sometimes I need to point out to my clients. Life is freaking messy, man. I can't give you this is exactly the point at which you intervene. I said, you're going to make mistakes. Sometimes you're going to intervene too soon. Sometimes it's going to be too late, but it's the experience of doing it that's going to teach you when you need to do it. And the other thing is there is rarely anything that if you do it wrong, the world's going to end. Because I found in parenting that if something would happen between my daughters and I didn't handle it right, it was a virtual guarantee God was going to give me a second chance on that one. And that even if I did handle it right, even if I did handle it right, there's a 90% chance I'm going to have it again. So I can mess it up that time. And my hope was that I would bring them into adulthood, not with a major psychosis, but a couple of minor neuroses. And we'd be able to move forward with that. And realizing that it's a matter of trying and failing and trying and succeeding and trying to bring a sense of humor with it as well.
And that is part of what's necessary. It's that third phase that we don't talk about, which is the phase of repair.
Right.
You've gone too far, you've gone too short, and now there's a bigger mess. And how do you repair? How do you repair what didn't quite work out at the first phase of your intervention or non-intervention? How do you repair that? And that's an important piece of the cycle that we don't often teach, is that repair part afterwards. And if you learn how to do the repair work, whether it's I yelled at you too harshly and I hurt your feelings, or I was ignoring you because I had to get this done, or whatever it is, acknowledging that something didn't work and slowing things down and doing a redo, was the kid doing the redo or the adult doing the redo. And the adult needs to be comfortable with doing redos of their own so you can model for a child. And the same thing can happen if the child's working with the dog and they over-rile up the dog. They get a redo. You will review with, oh gosh, it looks like, our dog got too excited. Look at what happened here. What are we going to do next time? And that's part of how you teach frustration tolerance.
Right.
And I think as trainers and coaches of either for dealing with your dog or your child, it's remembering that third phase, which is the repair phase, because that is an important life skill.
That is an important life skill. The other thing I would say too is that you need to know your child, or you need to know your dog. Like, for example, if I've got a dog who quickly revs up, and we're getting to the point where we go from 0 to 60 and we're going to spill over from arousal into aggression fairly quickly, my general advice to those owners is intervene sooner rather than later. because if a
Absolutely.
dog spills over into aggression and he's with a child, you can have a serious problem. So a lot of it is the depends thing. Whereas I have some groups with puppies where I'm intervening every 30 seconds to calm everybody down, take a treat, go back to playing before it starts to spill over into something I'm uncomfortable with. There's other groups of puppies I'm like, it's been 45 minutes. Does somebody want to interact? Because nothing's going on here. So I think a lot of it is once again, that depends. But knowing that if your child is hyper excitable, perhaps early intervention rather than waiting to see what happens, because we also don't want to establish a pattern of behavior where things go bad, I explode, mom, fix it. That's not a chain of behaviors that I want to see happening with either dogs or kids. So if we help them to learn the frustration tolerance a little bit sooner rather than later, that's probably a good thing. But that's just one example.
Julie, when you do that, I have to intervene every 30 seconds kind of thing, do you find that over time that you measure your success with, oh, it didn't happen for a whole minute. Oh, it didn't happen for 3 minutes, that there's this expansion?
Right. Well, what I find is that sometimes with dogs in play is that there's certain parts to play. It's loud, it's loose, it's lateral, it's repetitive, and it's supposed to be self-regulating. I think I remembered all my adjectives. And what I find that a lot of dogs need to learn is the self-regulation part. Play, stop. Play, stop. So that they bring themselves down so they don't spill over into aggression. So what I have found is that what I will do with dogs, and I'm working with play groups, or I'm working with trying to help an owner learn how to keep their dog from spilling over into a hyper arousal, is you just take a break. You feel like the dog's getting too aroused, take a break, have him sit, give him a treat, take a breath, start again. And the dog learns to insert self-regulation. And then you find yourself having to do it less and less. I don't know, Tina, you look like you don't agree with me. Do you agree with me? You don't agree with me?
Yes, I think we practice, and I did this with my kids, and I do this with my dogs. I practice where I'm likely to fuss, right? So I had foster kids who know their definition of no meant argue with the mom. That's not actually what no means. No means not right now. So we would just practice it, right? Or come up with a bunch of different ways to successfully clean our room, and then practice it maybe 5 or 10 times a day. So it's never a really big job, right? The same thing with the dogs. If my dog is jumping on the door because he's a fool and he's super excited to go outside, it's exactly the same set of skills. We're practicing getting it right and maybe doing 25 or 30 repetitions of that so that becomes, so that we dig out of the crazy hole we've dug for ourselves, right? So I have a pet peeve about kids going, mom, 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 mom. But like it's like being pecked to death by ducks. It makes me crazy. And so I just helped each of the foster kids who presented with that behavior a way that was easier for me, that didn't make my head jangly, to work through that. So and it was a very conscious, we start with like the child having no tolerance for frustration, and then moved up to what I would consider a healthier kind of norm of how to get help when you want attention. But I think in terms of, I'm teaching with every interaction, even the ones when I'm tired and frustrated. And so I might want to instead put my energy when I have it toward teaching what I want, instead of being frustrated and angry about all the garbage I don't want. That being said, like with dogs, with kids, it can't be all of the things, right? Like pick one or two things, focus on those, make some headway, and then go from there. So practicing that no doesn't mean argue with me was like one of my favorite things in the whole wide world to practice. The kids thought it was funny. We thought it was funny. We just would practice it. So I taught all of my kids no. come,
Stop.
stay,
Stay.
right, stop and stay, right? And that, like, we needed this handful of cues that I think, by the way, also all dogs need, right? Like, what? Like, you need to pay attention to the fact I'm talking to you when I say your name. And so we would just practice those things, and we would just make a game out of it. And in our household,
Yeah.
my left pocket had things for children, and my right pocket had things for dogs. And the kids pretty much only made the error of which pocket to go to once, maybe twice, because dogs are just not as yummy as, a box of raisins. And they would just, like, we would just get there from there. But I did for a little while there feel like a Pez dispenser of food. It's like I was weighted down with morsels of food on each side. But I often tell people, I think being raised in this wonky dog training world made me a more loving, kind, consistent parent, who was a little bit more objective, and that I was clear that whatever the crazy behaviors were, and there were some good ones, that was crying out for help, not crying at me. And I tend to do the same thing with dogs, that it's like the dog flipping its marbles into the wallboard is a dog that's struggling, not a dog who's trying to make you crazy, right? They're not doing it at you. They're doing it because they need you.
And I love this whole concept of teach what you want to see. Teach replacement behaviors, but it's very specific. This is what you can do in this situation. It drives me crazy when I see parents going, slow down, rather than walk. Just, a specific behavior.
Right.
Be careful, rather than I notice cliff.
Instead of, be careful to say, please don't walk off the cliff, or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Right. I tell parents, and I think Tina and I face this a lot with dogs. It's like, I don't want my dog to do that. Well, I don't want him to do that either. What do you want him to do instead? Let's train towards something. And
they need to know what to do.
Right. And no, well, he doesn't know what no means. I said, well, no means a whole lot of things here. It's just, no is not a command.
I go back to the How to Train Your Dragon, the first one. Like, one of my favorite parts in that movie, at both the beginning and the end, are the dad says to the little boy something along the lines of, I want you to stop. And the little boy goes, what? And the dad goes, that. And the little boy goes, that's all of me. Right? And I totally think that's how, well, I know, heck, as an adult, I sometimes feel that way, usually when Julie's scolding me, but it can be, I think our kids and our dogs both feel that way. And I think if we were to be completely, like, all joking aside, I think as adults, we feel that way. Like, we're pulled. I think while the internet has a whole bunch of really awesome things, it also has a really bunch of, like, crazy, pressuring, insane fallout. Anybody can put anything they want on there. And so people have, like, we have these unrealistic expectations of perfection, instead of thinking in terms of, can we just make incremental change that over time gets us to our goal, right? I can get fat really quickly. I've seen me do it. I'm not so good at getting skinny quickly. That takes more time and effort. So, and it is that journey of 100 itty bitty, or more, in my case, decisions, right? Do I go and grab the donut I really, really want, or do I go and grab the 20 grapes that are perhaps a better choice? I don't know. I loved being a wife and a mom and a dog trainer. That was pretty much magic. So, I also remember those moments where I was ready to, like, pull my hair out.
Yeah, but I
So-
think we all have those, and I think that's it's the sense in our society today is that when you have those moments, something is terribly wrong, and it needs to be fixed immediately because we all need to get back to our happy zone. And the thing is that, you know what? That's just life, and it will pass. And in some ways, all too soon, which is, as Mr. Bennett says in Pride and Prejudice, just let me feel bad for the moment. It will pass, and probably all too soon, because he really wanted to feel the pressure of his mistakes. And I think that is something that we can all appreciate, is that maybe we need to feel the presence of our mistakes a little bit more, and that it will pass. And maybe if we allow ourselves to feel the presence of our mistakes, we'll learn something so that we do it a little bit better the next time.
Hi, this is Julie, and thanks for listening to part 1 of Kids, Dogs, and Moms with Tina Spring, Dr. Sara Wyckoff, and myself. Be sure to join us for part 2.